When I say something like it's boring here, so I may not have so many daily videos, something's bound to happen, and it did. Of course, that's why I'm here again tonight. My platelet levels fell to the critical level of about 8,000 last night. For those of you who don't know, the average person's platelet levels should be between 150,000 to 175,000, and that's when you're doing really good and stuff, or just being an average normal person or whatever. So 8,000 is really bad. In fact, it's really critical too. I was I couldn't even hardly get up and walk into my bathroom, which is only about 10 feet away from me and back. I was so out of breath when I got back. Okay, so they do a blood draw every morning at 12 a.m. That's right, they wake me up at 12 a.m. So around 2 a.m., my nurse brought my platelets in. And there's a funny coincidence about that too, but I'll tell you about that later. Anywho, whenever I got an infusion back in New Mexico, they would give me a Tylenol and Benadryl like cocktail about 20 minutes before they would do the infusion. Because I tend to have an allergic reaction. Once you get a lot of infusions of either blood or platelets and stuff like that, your body will start to have allergic reactions to it. Mine didn't have ones in the very beginning, I'd say like 6 years ago or 7 years ago when this first started. But after getting so many for so long, and I'm not sure if it really started again this time around, because there was a 5-year hiatus where I wasn't getting any infusions. But then it started happening again. Okay, so they would give me the Tylenol and Benadryl about 20 minutes before giving me the platelets. And it seems that what the allergic reaction is, I'll start getting welts, like huge pimples or whatever, but then they never get a whitehead. It's just huge, swells on my skin and stuff like that, about some of the size of a dime maybe, or something like that. Some are smaller, and it makes me itch and and stuff like that. And some look like hives too, like on my leg. It was a whole group of little bumps and stuff like that, and it really makes me itch and stuff. So that started happening afterwards. And by the way, I even asked my nurse beforehand. I go, what about my Tylenol and Benadryl beforehand? And she said it hadn't been ordered. So I was like, well, maybe things have changed since I got, newer and different cells now. So, let's go with it. Well, it didn't. So I was up from about 2 a.m. in the morning, itching and scratching and finding new welts on my body. And they did give me Benadryls afterwards, but it mostly made me sleepy, and I didn't really get any sleep, So I gave my CBCI people, which stands for Colorado Blood and Cancer Institute. Those are the people who are really running the show here. Even though I'm in Presbyterian St. Luke Hospital here in Colorado, CBCI, who also has an office in this building or a facility inside the hospital building, they never passed the word on to the nursing staff, because I did tell them about it in some of our pre-treatment meetings that we had. They were asking me if I had any allergies, and I said, yeah, to transfusions with either blood or platelets and stuff like that. So I gave them a good dressing down this morning, and they promised me it would never happen again, and I was like, good. So not a good day overall. The Benadryl works differently if it's given to me before than when it does afterwards, because afterwards it just screws with you. It makes you feel terrible or whatever, and sleepy and fatigued and stuff like that. Whereas when they give it to me beforehand, they're busy fighting the allergy and stuff like that as it's coming in. So after I get the transfusion, I never even really notice any itching and scratching at all and stuff. So like I said, not a good day at all. I haven't mentioned, another thing is I haven't mentioned a lot of the other medications I'm taking, because I really don't have a list of them. I'm taking probably about 15 pills a day right now, anywhere, I would say, from 10 to 15 pills of different kinds. Some of them are the same at each, one or at each time or whatever, but they're the same pills over again and stuff like that. One thing they do now that they didn't do last time is these eye drops here. And I have to do these. It's a little capsule, and you break the top open, and then you put some eye drops in each eye, and that's for what's called a GVH is what they call it, and that's called graft versus host disease. I tend to call it donor versus host disease because that more accurately describes what it is. It's you might pick up a disease from the donor, in certain areas, and they have a GVH for everything: skin, stomach, and all your other areas and stuff. Eyes, also inside your mouth, so an oral GVH, stuff like that. So, if I find out some of the names of the other pills, I may pass them along or whatever. Okay, back to that coincidence I was talking about when that girl was giving me platelets. Remember the coincidence of my nurse Brian giving me, Brian, my new cells and stuff like that? Well, when I got my donor platelets last night, my nurse, whose name is Rachel, said, "Oh, your platelets came from a donor in Cheyenne, Wyoming." And I was like, wow, nobody else in the last 7 years has ever told me where my platelets have come from. This was another coincidence because the person who will be house sitting our house and our cats while we're gone for the 3 months after I get out here, well, her name is Cheyenne also. She likes to be called Shy, but her name is Cheyenne. So that was pretty eerie again. Just these coincidences keep piling up and stuff. But after my platelet infusion, my level went back up to 39,000, which is still a far cry from the 150,000, but it keeps me from bleeding internally. See, if you don't know, everybody bleeds internally to some point. You just never see it because your platelets clot up those bleeds. And they mostly happen in your stomach and GI tract area and stuff like that. I had a colonoscopy a while back where they went in, it was about 4 or 5 months ago, when I was bleeding real bad in my stools or whatever. Sorry to mention that, but it happens. But they went in and cauterized it and infused all the openings and stuff like that. And I didn't have to get another transfusion until last night, as a matter of fact. So it worked really well and stuff. But, okay, so whenever you get low on the platelets, say around 15,000 or lower, there is a chance some blood will come out in ways you don't really want to know about, as I mentioned a minute ago. It can also come out in your urine. I've never had that happen. And you can get nosebleeds easily. They don't want you using a razor because you could cut yourself and just bleed like a stuck pig, or something like that. Again, there's not enough platelets to clot up those outlets, which are usually, like I said, in your stomach and GI tract and stuff like that. Okay, so my ANC level today is 224. I think that's down. I think it was like 6 something on my last video. But now we're down to 224 and it's still headed down, which is good. By the way, they gave me a sleeping aid for tonight and it's starting to kick in right now, so I'm going to have to end this here. But I wanted to put out a big old thanks to all my friends and stuff for that. Like, once again, for all the encouraging words of support. Y'all have a great night, and we will talk to you later.